Okay, y'all, welcome back. Today, we're going to be covering healing with mental illness. In the last video, I covered healing without an apology, right? And I gave you a step-by-step method on how to do that. And so I'm also going to review some of the techniques that I did to help myself heal living with mental illness. First off, I hate the term mental illness. Sometimes I struggle with wanting to say mental health condition. You know what I mean? Because it just sounds, you know what I mean? Because when you hear illness, there's just such a negative connotation to it, right? And there's nothing wrong with having mental illness or a mental health condition, however you want to say it, okay? So let's get into it. All right. For context, I was diagnosed with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. I used to have really severe depression and really severe anxiety. Right now, anxiety is very mild, and depression is seasonal. Don't let it get cold, baby. I'm ugh. And my PTSD is way less chronic. And that took a while. It took a while because I experienced a lot of trauma, and I used to try to block the trauma out by being productive. I think I mentioned that in the last video. I'm getting things done, getting things done, but I was not healing myself. Avoidant. It was definitely giving avoidant personality. If you don't know your personality type, or your attachment style, first of all, if you don't know your attachment style, don't get married yet. Know that first before you start getting married, okay? And know your person's attachment style too. Okay, but we'll get into that on another topic, another episode, okay? All right. So like I said, we're going to be talking about healing with mental illness. And I've already disclosed my mental health conditions or my mental illnesses. And also for context, my mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, severe depression, and also severe anxiety, and has been homeless for 15 plus years. And her story and her situation is what really was one of my driving forces behind prioritizing my mental health. And then also being a mother, you know what I mean? And making sure that I'm the best mother that I can possibly be for my child. So without further ado, let's get into the tea. Okay. And y'all know I got my notes here. I'm going to be going back and forth. Don't judge me. Okay. I'm trying to focus. Now, the first thing that I did was exactly what I just did with y'all. I disclosed what it was. I named what I was carrying without any judgment, without any shame. There are millions of people who are dealing with all types of mental illnesses or mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, you name, there's a whole book about it. So you have to name the diagnosis, or you can even name your symptoms. Then I would say I had to learn how to separate myself from my experiences. That was really challenging because when you experience so much trauma in your life, you essentially become that. It's your whole life is surrounded around the experiences that you had and the trauma that you've experienced. And that's not reality. You were a person, you were a human being before any of this happened to you. You know what I mean? So separate the person from the experience, right? You are not your experience. You are not your mental illness. You are not your mental health condition, right? Separate you from the experience, yeah? And then I would say I had to work on my language and the way that I spoke with myself. Instead of asking myself, what's wrong with me? We always shame ourselves. Every time we're going through something, we shame ourselves. And I hate that for us. And I had to really work on asking myself, what is my nervous system asking me right now? What does my nervous system need? Before I actually went to therapy, I nervous system, what? What are we talking about here? You know what I mean? But the reality of it is a lot of us are in fight or flight or survival mode, and so it's rare that you can actually experience a calm nervous system. That is a very peaceful thing. So just remember, you're not your experience, you are you, and replace your language a little bit. Instead of asking yourself, what's wrong with you? Ask yourself, what is my nervous system needing right now? And also you're not broken. Just because you have been diagnosed with something, it doesn't mean that you are broken. It means that your body and your mind and your soul, your spirit, it's responding to everything, which is a natural thing, okay? Then I would say 2 would be building a support group. And you can't just have one person. It can't just be one person. Y'all, that's exhausting. I've been the go-to person for years for a lot of people. and I would find myself pouring and pouring and pouring into everyone's cup, and baby, my cup then ran dry. It's not a drop in the cup. Cup is bone dry. Desert, Arizona. You know what I mean? So I had to really learn how to build a support system. And the first thing that I started with was myself. I am my biggest support system. Like, self-support means so much, and it looks differently based on the person, right? It could be journaling, it could be rituals that you have, and it could be like grounding techniques. And I'll get into some of the grounding techniques, but for me, my number one source of support is, for one, source, obviously, you know, spirit, and myself. And then you have to get professional support, y'all. Like, there is such a stigma around talking to a therapist. There's, especially like I said, I'm a Black woman. So a lot of times, like within the Black households, like if you go to therapy, people are automatically thinking something is wrong with you. Like, what, you're going to therapy? What's wrong? That's the first one, what's wrong? And it's like, yeah, there is something triggering, right? But there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with seeking another opinion that's non-biased and non-judgmental, and that can provide you with a different perspective, and that can provide you with tools that help you grow. Talk to a therapist, y'all. Therapist, psychiatrist, maybe even a life coach. You know, you can get a life coach, you can get a spiritual advisor, but you know, depending on how severe your situation might be, you need to make sure that you're catering to your own needs, right? And then I would say a safe haven, like a safe human. It could be your bestie, it could be your partner, it could be a support group, right? So build a support system or a support triangle, right? Not just one person, because relying on one source is exhausting, not just for them, but for you too. With healing, it really requires infrastructure. It requires foundation, not just willpower. I used to think like, if I just keep pushing and keep being productive, keep avoiding all this shit, like I could just keep going, and then the trauma just piling up, and then next thing you know, you're crashing out. So remember that healing, especially with like a mental illness or a mental health condition, it really requires having a solid foundation, not just willpower, okay? Okay, then 3, expectations. Whew. You need to adjust your expectations, just like in the dating pool. Adjust your expectations. No, you need to adjust them. Don't lower them, right? But you need to adjust your expectations. Healing is not linear. Growth is not linear. Growth does not go like this. It does not look like that. Growth looks like this. The healing looks like this. You know what I mean? It's not linear. And that, I think that's a really critical one, because some days you're healing by resting. And then some days you're healing by surviving. And then other days you might be healing by not crashing out. When you actually catch yourself and you're like, oh, I did not crash out. I did not spiral. That's healing. You know what I mean? That's growth. And that's progress, right? So what does progress look like? It looks like, and this was something that I really struggled with before. It looks like giving yourself self-compassion after a setback. Like after you're triggered and you crash out or do whatever you do, you have to give yourself grace and give yourself self-compassion. And then it also looks like faster recovery, right? Maybe you used to spiral out for a week. Maybe now you're only spiraling for 3 days. Listen, a win is a win. A win is a win. Baby steps. Baby steps, y'all. I would also say like having shorter episodes. Maybe you're spiraling or your crash out or your whatever situation you might be going through. Maybe you used to do it for 4 days and now you're doing it for 1. You know what I mean? Like shorter episodes, faster recovery, and more self-compassion. Okay, that is what progress looks like. And understanding that progress and seeing it is kind of like a form of stability, and stability is a form of healing. Okay. And then let's touch on some of the grounding that I was talking about. You have to learn how to regulate first, and then you have to reflect. Initially, your response, like when you are struggling with a mental health condition or a mental illness, you react. Like, you react. Or you might numb yourself. You know, it's like kind of like a fight or flight. You know what I mean? So you have to regulate first, and then you have to reflect. So what does that look like? Sometimes, like when I used to get really revved up, like I could physically feel my body overheating, like getting hot. Have you ever felt so much rage and so much anger that your body becomes like it's boiling, you know, and it's like, oh my God, like you can feel it, you know what I mean? So like getting cold water, putting it on your face, putting it on your wrist, kind of cooling yourself down. It looks like breathing. Breathe. I forget to breathe every single day. So you have to remember to breathe. Gentle movements, you know, laying flat on the floor, like grounding yourself and like, you know, sitting on the grass. Something that I personally have used was the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. If you are not familiar with 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique, please Google it, YouTube it, okay? It helps to calm your body and provide you a little bit more clarity. Like it calms your body and it clears your mind, especially if you have a problem with disassociating, right? Because oftentimes when you're dealing with mental illness, you might be physically present, your body's there, but mentally, like, baby, you're gone. What do we go? What happened? Who's here? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? You're disassociating. It's like you're watching yourself. You know what I mean? And in order to ground yourself and get back into reality, 5-4-3-2-1 is like, mwah, chef's kiss. Okay? For me personally, like I said, you need to find what works for you. Okay? Let me see. Working with your cycles and not against them. So in my personal experience, like my mental illness or condition, like it comes in waves, you know, it's like, it comes in waves. For me, because I've done so much work on my healing, like I'm really mindful and aware of what my triggers are and like when my moods change and when my energy levels drop, right? So you have to be mindful of the waves of your mental health illness or whatever the case. And then like create like low impact routines for yourself, you know, like plan important tasks for like days when you have a higher capacity. Like just be mindful of yourself so you're not overexerting and overwhelming yourself, because it's easy to do that. Even though you want to try to be as consistent as possible when it comes to being mindful about your healing, healing is not about forcing consistency. It's really about flexibility and creating flexibility for yourself. Because like I said, mental illness, it comes in waves. So it's not about like forcing this consistent practice. It's more so of like understanding like where you are and creating something flexible that can work with you. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay. All right. I think this is 6. So then once you have learned how to work with your cycles, I would say you probably want to redefine what healing means, you know, and what it doesn't mean. So that's like redefining healing, right? Healing does not mean that you're all love and light and like you're all positive. I'm healed. Everything's great. Just over here, I'm happy. No, that is not what healing means. And it doesn't mean that you'll never need help again, right? Because like I told you in the last video, you might have healed from something last month. Next thing you know, somebody passed away in your family, you got to heal from that. Next thing you know, you done got laid off from your job. Next thing you know, your husband cheating on you. Next thing you know, he beating on you too. Like it's just one thing after the next. So healing doesn't mean that your symptoms are going to disappear forever. It doesn't mean that you're going to be positive all the time. And it doesn't mean that you're never going to need help again. So get that through your head, okay? Sooner rather than later, okay? I had to learn the hard way. What does healing mean? I would say healing means you are aware enough of your triggers so you ask for help sooner rather than later, right? Before the crash out. You trust yourself more. When I realized that I was really healing when I was trusting myself, trusting my instincts, trusting my intuition, trusting my gut, just trusting myself, even on the bad days. When you have more self-trust, that's when you really learn that you are healing. And then also just responding to yourself with care. Talk good about yourself. You know, do self-care. Responding to yourself with care and not criticism, okay? Speaking of criticism, releasing the shame around needing help. or even medication in some cases. I have never been medicated for anything. I've always taken more of like a holistic approach, but I do not shun anyone who might require medication. You know, I know someone who wasn't on medication for a while, and they experienced a lot of S thoughts. You know what I mean? And once they got on medication, like they were chill. Like, of course they're still healing, but it really worked for them. So release the shame around that. Please do. Needing support, it doesn't mean that it's a failure. You know, it's not a failure of your intuition. It's not a failure of spirituality. It's not a failure of strength. It doesn't mean that is a failure. Medication can kind of act as like a bridge, you know what I mean, to kind of put the pieces together for you. And I think therapy is more like training. Consider it training, you know what I mean, and not a weakness, because everyone needs to learn from somebody, you know what I mean? So consider it like training. And then also, just because you might need some sort of medication around it, it does not mean that it doesn't mean that your inner power is just like null and void. It does not mean that. It means that the support that you're receiving supports your inner power. Does that make sense? The fact that you have awareness to go get help, that supports your inner power. That's a strength. That's a pro. A win is a win. You can be deeply intuitive and still be clinically supported, and that's okay. You know what I mean? So release the shame around medication or needing help, please. Now, I think this is probably something that I probably still struggle with to this day, is like creating a bad day protocol. Like when you have a bad day, you need to decide before you're overwhelmed, right? So like, what does that look like? Include like grounding tools, you know, doing the grounding technique, or if you have a person that you need to text, or this is something that I'm really gonna prioritize for 2026, is just giving myself permission to rest. You have to give yourself permission to rest. Also, you have to give yourself permission to cry. Y'all know we got the new moon. What is it, January 3rd? Is it the Capricorn moon? Don't get me to lying, but there's something going on with the moon on January 3rd. And everybody's emotions are like flooding, right? And you have to give you have to give yourself permission to do that. You have to give yourself permission to cry. It is okay to cry. Also, men, if there are any men on here, it is okay to cry. Okay? It's fine. Okay? Just making sure we get that out there. And then you also have to like set a reminder for yourself. This too shall pass. It will pass. It is a moment. It's not forever. So I think when you create like a bad day protocol, it's kind of like a form of self-trust, but in action. And so, like I said, I'm going to be working more on that for 2026, but I would say create a bad day protocol for yourself. And, wins. You need to celebrate your small wins and your quiet wins. Everybody doesn't need to know what your wins are, right? They're internal, right? So when you're healing with mental illness, sometimes it looks invisible. Sometimes it looks like you're not seen. And so little things like getting up and getting out of bed, that is a win. It's a quiet win. You get what I'm saying? You get where I'm going with this? Taking the medication that you were prescribed, that is a win. Not responding to intrusive thoughts, baby. The thoughts get intrusive. I've gotten way better. But like 3-4 years ago, intrusive thoughts at its peak. You understand? And so in those moments, I had to learn how to choose kindness over self-attack. Because when you are dealing with mental illness, you tend to attack yourself, you know? And we don't need to do that. Even though these are small and quiet wins, a win is a win, okay? Okay, now, that was 9. So I think we're in the last one. 10. You're always healing. You need to remember, you are healing even when it doesn't feel like you're healing. So like, what does that look like? When you pause and you just, before you react, that is a form of healing. The moment you choose that it's okay for you to fucking take a break and take a rest, that is healing. when you offer yourself compassion instead of attacking yourself, after you may have had a little crash out moment, you may have crashed out, you know, but you're like, listen, I gotta give myself grace. When you have that moment of self-compassion, that is healing, okay? So those are the 10 steps that I personally have used to help me heal on my journey. And like I told y'all before, I used to have chronic PTSD. You know, PTSD, you know, it's still kind of there. I'm Black. Post-traumatic slave disorder, okay? It's generational. So it's, you know, but you work through it, you know? No one's ever completely healed. Everyone is always healing from something, okay? And it is okay. That's okay. All right, y'all. I'm not gonna keep y'all for too long. Wishing everybody much peace, prosperity, protection, and abundance for 2026. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all the things. And I will see y'all on the next one. Mwah.